Hey everybody, welcome. I am so delighted that you were able to come and to do this with me today. I see faces and people I know, so I'm really excited about that. This is one of my favorite topics. I learned PowerPoint back in the 90s and I've used it a lot. It's one of my very favorites. And I had a little bit of a wake-up call, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go. But I thought, I think I know everyone, but I'll go ahead and do a quick introduction for the benefit of those who are going to see this by recorded entry. So my name is LaDonna Coy. I am a learning facilitator, a trainer, a budding writer, and an entrepreneur. And I spent about 15 years in prevention, substance abuse prevention specifically. And my role vacillated between a lot of things, but program development, senior program development, and then I also did their technology transfer work. So I had a nice smattering of experience. And it was that tech transfer work that got me interested in social media, and I got excited about it. It was like, oh my goodness, this feels like it's big. And in 2006, I decided that it was big and that it was worth it, and it was going to change everything. And so I jumped. I started doing work as an entrepreneur, consultant, and doing my own trainings. And I was right. Things did change, and social media has changed everything, just not exactly the way I thought it would. So I discovered some things along the way. I discovered some things about certainty and about knowing things and about how dangerous it is when you know things or you master things and you think about it in terms of, I've mastered that, I can move on. And the truth is that's not the truth. You never stop learning. And one day I had a friend send me a link to SlideShare. And I took a look and I thought, this is awesome. We are going to rock this with prevention. We're going to put our slide decks up and we're going to get people talking about our work, and it's going to be so exciting. And then I noticed this thing on the side of the screen that said featured slide decks. So I took a look and I was just stunned. They were beautiful, colorful, great texture, big images that just popped off the screen. They were just gorgeous. And I looked at my slide decks and I knew they were just too pathetic to post. And I knew then that I wanted to know what these people knew that I didn't know that made this possible. And so I became a student again. I started doing a whole lot of work, research and learning and digging, and I started experimenting and researching and trying out things and see what worked. And sure enough, and I started getting some good feedback about it. So I started posting. I plucked up my courage. I'll never forget posting the first one thinking, oh my gosh, people are going to see this. It's like, why was I so afraid of that? But anyway, I did. And I continued to post things over the years. And this year in January, I got a notice from SlideShare that my slide decks were among the top 3% of the slides viewed on SlideShare. And I was just stunned. It's like that, how can that be? The top 3% people are actually looking at my slides. And then I looked at the numbers. And I've got 2 slide decks that SlideShare actually shared in their feature column, and one of those has over 20,000 views. So it's like, they just blew me away with this whole notion. And then I thought, I'm onto something here. This is good stuff, and I need to share it. I need to find a way to share it back with my field. And so that's a part of what today's about, is sharing it back. And I thank you for being here. I'd like for you to think for a moment about some of the challenges you have when you get ready to sit down and do your slide decks. When you got a presentation coming up and you're getting ready to develop your slide deck, what are some of the challenges you face? Very good. Let's type in some of those challenges. When I've worked on this stuff, one of the things that I have found that people often tell me is that they struggle with the amount of content that they're going to put in their slide decks. How much do I include? How much do I not? I actually have a bit of a funny story, and I'll share it with you while you're typing in the chat window. On the right-hand side of your screen there's a chat window. Find that and type in your chat. I was working with a researcher, which, as you know, these people are like super smart, and they know a whole lot of stuff, and they go really deep in their field, way further than most of us do. And this particular guy showed up at the rehearsal for the webinar with 172 slides, and we had 90 minutes. And all I could think of was, oh my goodness, there's just no way we're going to get through all these slides in 90 minutes. It's not going to happen. So I sat with that for a minute. I did the math really quick, and I figured out that's one every 52 seconds. and I'm thinking, no, this just isn't going to work. So I finally plucked up my courage and said, I think this is way too much content for 90 minutes. I think we need to trim some of it back and get down to the really essential stuff. And he without missing a beat, said, I can deliver a slide every 30 seconds. And he went right on talking. So I waited a little bit, and I let him work a while. And then I came back with it, and I said, we've covered about 15 slides, and we've been talking for 30 minutes. I don't think we can cover all of these slides in the 90 minutes we have, and I really recommend that you go back and pull some of them out because there's just too much here. And fortunately, he took that to heart, but we've all had that happen. I'm guilty of it, and I'm guessing that you may be guilty of it too from time to time. It's not easy. It's not easy doing all that stuff. It's deciding what goes in and what doesn't. And it's not just about what we can deliver in that amount of time. It's actually the flip side of that. It's more about what the participant can take in and work with and do something with, to digest and learn from. And so that was my big check-in when it came to working with researchers on huge slide decks. I see, let's see what's going on in the chat. I'm going to look real quick before we go on. Ray, biggest challenge, design consistency. Oh my goodness, yes. Finding the right images, fonts, styles to use, determining which content to leave in and keep. Yeah, absolutely. You nailed it, Ray. Those are all big challenges. They are for me too. Susan says, having a breadth of high quality images to use, always a challenge. It's getting better though. We're actually finding better stuff out there, descriptive stuff. And sometimes the less polished the image, the better. And then we have helping clients understand the value of non-templated slides. Be still my heart, Susan. That is exactly it. We've been taught to do things a particular way, and it includes those templates, doesn't it? Let's see, working with other people's content and their original PowerPoint decks. Boy, do I ever resonate with that. I generally feels less clunky to me trying to piece everything together, yeah. There is the visual, there's the interactivity, there's the content, there's the engagement that you have with people, the pauses, the whole enchilada, so to speak. Natalie says making it look pretty. Absolutely. We always want it to look pretty. We want it to look attractive so we can capture people's attention. And I think we got most of those. So excellent, excellent. Thank you. Great, great feedback. Good challenges to have, right? Right. So let's go with the first thing that you can do that'll absolutely shift the way that your PowerPoint presentations look, the way that you can transform them into something much greater than what they are originally. Number one, the number one thing we absolutely must do if we're going to actually master slide decks and do them really well is we have to drop the bullet points. And Susan, you and I think a couple of other people actually, Ray and others, mentioned the whole trouble with bullet points and how using those templates is just deadly for our participants. But there's some science reasons why we don't use those bullet points. Primarily, they're not helpful. It's because of how the brain works that makes them not helpful. And I'm going to try to explain this the best way I understand it. Your eyes don't actually see the content. It's your brain that sees it. And the brain sees every letter as a picture. And it very quickly clusters those pictures together and it creates a word, and you get the word. And then it becomes phrases and sentences, and finally it's like, okay, these words together mean this. And so you make meaning out of it. Now what happens in bullet points is the next bullet point comes up, your brain sees characters, it puts it together, it creates words, creates phrases, creates sentences, and creates meaning. And by then there's another bullet point pops up, and your brain sees characters, and then words, and then phrases and sentences, and makes meaning. And I think you can see where this is going. How long do you think your brain can keep that up? And in the research, they call it cognitive load. I call it cognitive overload in the terms of PowerPoint and the craziness we have around those bullet points. Cognitive load is basically how hard your mind has or your brain has to work in order to learn the content. And bullet points will wear people out. And I'm betting that you've experienced it. I know I have. And frankly, I've been guilty of doing it myself in the past. I don't do it anymore, but I have been in the past. So that's one of the reasons why bullet points are just killers when it comes to learning, because people have to work so hard to absorb the bullet points. There's another reason why, and it's probably even more important. It's because your hearing channel and your seeing channel will clash. I think of it as merging on a highway and two cars just kind of crashing into each other. That's what happens in your brain when we have the presenter speaking and PowerPoint bullets coming up on the slide. We're trying to read the PowerPoint bullets and listen to the speaker, and you can't do those two things at the same time. Your brain just won't let it happen. Now, I was skeptical about this because I, for a long time, thought I was pretty good at multitasking, and I could actually pull that off. I could read that and listen at the same time. And then I decided, you know, the best thing for me to do is to test that theory. So I began to test it, and I found out it's true for me. It doesn't work. I can do one or the other, and what happens is I'm switching back and forth pretty quick. I'm going and reading real quick and trying to get back to the presenter. So I'm actually working really hard doing that. So bullet points are not the best thing for us to be using in our PowerPoints. And if we're not going to use bullet points, then what on earth do we put on these slides? Well, that brings us to our next point. And it is, you've got to go visual. It's because in the brain science we know that vision trumps all the other senses. Pictures communicate instantly. Words, of course, because that sequence that I told you about, means that your brain takes longer and it increases the cognitive load. The research also says if we use words with a picture, we need to use only 6 or 7 words optimally and put them on the picture or near the picture because proximity matters. And if you'll remember, the old way of doing PowerPoint was that we had 7 lines of text and 7 words on every line, right? Well, throw that out the window. That's not going to work anymore. Let's just toss those bullet points in their entirety out. We don't want to use them. So when we come to visuals, what visuals work best? And you were talking about it in the chat, so I'm glad that we're kind of on the same page. The one visual you don't want to use, let's start there, is clip art. Clip art is what we did back in the late 80s and early 90s and probably into the late 90s. And I have actually seen really good presenters, really high-profile presenters use it even recently in the last year. And it's just so sad. I feel bad because I think there are people in the room that just kind of poo-poo the ideas because of the clip art, because it looks old and outdated and worn out. And I don't want to be guilty of that, and I know you don't either. And I don't think we want our participants to be feeling that way about us. So just don't use the clip art at all. It doesn't mean you can't use illustrations and other things. Just stay away from the built-in clip art. In fact, stay away from anything that's built into PowerPoint, even the images that they have built in there. Just don't use them because they get overused, and then people don't pay attention to them anymore. So you want something novel and unique because your brain loves novelty, and you want to give that novelty to it. So let me tell you a little bit about Creative Commons. If you would, in the chat window, tell me if you use Creative Commons or not, if that's something that you're familiar with and that you use. Susan says she does. Ray, I've used them as well. Very good. Yeah, if you haven't used them, Creative Commons is really a powerful collection, and a lot of people contribute to it. You can as well if you choose to the library of Creative Commons. I do on Flickr. I make a lot of my images Creative Commons on Flickr. What it is we often call it copyleft. As you know, anything you put out there is automatically copyrighted for you. Now, you may or may not have your information on it or your name or any of that, but it's copyrighted. And Creative Commons lets you do the opposite of that. It lets you put things out there and tell people how you want them to use what you just put out. So, for example, if I put out a handout, I can put a Creative Commons license on it and say attribution. And you can use it, any of you can use it, as long as you say where you got it. So the copyright is automatic. If you'll actually do copyleft, you don't have to worry so much about people contacting you to use your materials. You can actually put it out there, tell them how you want it used, and they can use it. If they want to use it in a different way, they do need to contact you. So you have a lot more control over the specifics of how that gets used. The other thing is you can use materials that other people put Creative Commons on. And in particular, I'm thinking about photos, because photos are so incredible and hard to find really good ones and really the ones that you really want. And so if you can use Creative Commons photos, you save money, number one. You don't have so much to spend, and you get to honor somebody else's work, and that's always fun, to get to use somebody else's work and honor them. Just follow the license. And there's actually a website, creativecommons.org. And if you actually go to YouTube, one of my favorite videos on YouTube is a Creative Commons image video. It tells you how to use Creative Commons. There's several up there now. But go and check those out because it will explain it so beautifully in just a few minutes. You got it. And it's a great resource for us. Okay? Got it? Got it? Good deal. Okay, number 3 on our list. We did number 1, drop the bullet points, right? And number 2, we're going to pick up images. We're going to go visual. And number 3, we're going to animate with purpose. We've all seen the epic fail of animation. I think every one of us have seen it. We may even have done it. I have. I've done the epic fail on animation. It's like the dreaded flying monkeys from The Wizard of Oz meets the minions on Despicable Me. It just is a train wreck waiting to happen. And so a little bit of animation can actually be fun if that's your intention, is to have a little fun. I know Ray and I've done that. We've done little bits of animation that have just been fun and interesting for people. But the research says to only use it when you have a purpose, when you've got a point to make, and that animation helps you make that point. So over in the chat window, what I'd like to know from you is what kinds of animations have you seen that worked really well and made the point and seemed like they were spot on? So tell me a little bit about that. I like to use animation when I'm building a model, like if I've got a model of let's say the public health model would be an example that we use in prevention a lot, where you build that model little by little, and then you can use animation to interrupt that to show how it actually works. Right? I've used maps, and you can take people on a journey stop by stop on a map, and I animate that. Frameworks, building ideas, maps. Help me out here. What are some other ones? And Ray says, just because you can do animation doesn't mean you should. Very true, Ray. The bottom line with animation is less is more. Do less of it and do it very strictly with purpose. And we don't need to talk about bullet points and animating those, do we? Because we're not going to do them anymore, so we can slide right over that. Number 4 on our list of things we can do right now to make our PowerPoints better or to transform them into something far better is to be conversational. And this is a little bit slide deck and a little bit presentation style. Those two things are going to come together right here. And the reason I say that is when we do formal presentations, that style is usually a little more rigid. The language is more formal. And it doesn't feel as comfortable for people. And what we've learned through some of the research is that when people are comfortable, they can think better and more clearly. And when we use a conversational style, when we're talking with people, it flows. It's like a flow of information that we can ride on, and the brain absolutely loves it. The most important thing that I saw out of the brain science is that your brain loves a conversation and it pays attention. What happens is your brain doesn't know when it's going to be its turn next. And when it thinks it's in a conversation, it pays really close attention because it's going to have a turn here in a little bit, and you're going to be able to speak up. So it tracks so that it's ready to respond and people stay with you. So if we can do a conversational style, it helps. It helps us to stay together. So how do we support conversational style with our slides? And I have a couple of things. I'm hoping that you have some other ways that you think about this. But even if you don't expect a response, it's really good to use a conversational style. There are 2 ways that I know of to actually make your slides more supportive of that conversational style, and that is use contractions. When we talk to each other, we don't say, "What is your greatest challenge?" We usually say in a conversation tone, "What's your greatest challenge?" And the brain sees the difference in that, and it responds differently. So when you present like you talk, it actually is very helpful for your participants because they can stay with you better and they can flow with the conversation better. Wow. So let's go and use conversational style whenever we're doing this work. Number 5 on the list is one of my personal favorites, as you all know. Go social. There are so many ways to take presentation slides and slide decks and presentations themselves social. We just have a whole lot of opportunity for that. So when is the last time you were at a conference and the proctor or the presenter said to you, "Please leave your cell phones on and your mobile devices on today during the workshop"? You are the very first presenter that we've had that told us to leave our devices on. Nobody has done that, and the whole room erupted in applause. I was just blown away that people were really responding in that way. So it was one of those experiences where I learned a whole lot about being able to engage with people and not have them turn their device off. To me, that's the unpardonable sin, is for a presenter to ask people to turn those devices off. So when you're talking about going social with your slide decks, there's some really simple things you can do to get yourself into that mode. And that is, always have your slides, a slide in your deck that has the hashtag on it. Even if you don't use social media, put a slide in your slide deck early on with the hashtag and encourage people to use it. Even if you don't, absolutely encourage people to use it. If you do, so much the better. You can engage with them after your workshop's over. You can pull in the thread as a part of your workshop if you're willing to pluck up that courage and step into it and really bring it up. You can. You can make it a part of your slide, a part of your presentation. The other thing is you're already practicing something really important. When you bring in your visuals and you put your words on your slide or near the image on your slide, those 6 or 7 words make those tweet friendly. So people can actually share really pithy short sayings or phrases via social media very quickly and very easily. So it's a real simple, easy thing to do when you start putting those things on your slide. The third thing, and it's something that I don't see very often, and I've actually not done myself, but I think it's a heck of an idea, and I'm going to start doing it, is to put 1 or 2 or maybe 3 tops slides that are tweetable in your slide deck. So in other words, you're going to put up a slide that says tweet me, and you're going to have the exact tweet that you're going to give people that is a key message of your presentation, a key message you want to get across. Give it to them so that they don't have to think about it, compose it, type it up, and then send it. You're going to give it to them, so all they're going to do is type it up and send. You're going to save them some time and some frustration with actually trying to figure out, okay, how do I compose what I want to say and say it in a way that makes sense, put the hashtag and do all that. Let's give it to them. This is especially helpful for new people using social media in that setting, because I can remember when I first started doing it and I was too slow at getting it, and then I would miss part of the presentation because I was messing with the technology. So if we can spoon feed some of that, we can put up just 2 or 3 slides that are tweetable in the deck so that when we come up on them, we actually can leave them on, we can talk a little bit, and they can actually tweet what's on that deck. Now, I get a lot of pushback on this one from presenters that don't like it when people are looking down and doing something that they don't know what they're doing. And so they automatically assume that they're not paying attention. And it's never been my assumption. Early on, I decided that I was going to assume, to choose to assume that people in the room, if they're looking down and I see their faces lit up with that soft blue light, that they're actually doing something related to the workshop. Now, granted, they could be on their email for all I know, but I'm going to believe that they're doing something related to the workshop. And I can usually tell if that's happening by the tweet feed, by looking at the back channel and seeing how active it is. And the onus is on me to make that workshop interesting enough that people want to do that they'll actually be engaged, and to make it friendly enough for them to jump in and do it without having a lot of frustration. So I don't expect rapt attention hanging on my every word. No, not at all. That's not how we learn. And so I always assume that people are going to be doing social media in action. Last year I wrote the book, The 8-Step Social Media Path, basic guide for getting started or restarted with social media, because what I found is a lot of people were dabbling in it but really didn't have direction and didn't understand how to create a presence in social media. I also found that they didn't know how to take the personal and the business or the organization's work and work with those together or separately, however they needed to. So I wrote this little book. So I started giving this thing away everywhere I go, so I'm going to give it to you. If you want it, click on the button and it'll take you to a page where you can add it to a cart. And it doesn't cost anything. It's zero cost, but it actually requires you to add it to a cart, and then you can check out and download it. If you know someone who needs it or that would benefit from it, take that link that you're going to land on and give them that link. That way they can subscribe, and I wind up building my list, and it helps me. So I'm going to make the ask that if you like the book and you know someone else who needs it and you want to share the link with them so they can join, and I can actually begin to build my list a little bit stronger than what it is right now. So thank you for that. Let me do my little plug for my book. Now let's jump to number 6. I'm going to jump over to number 6. Number 6 is call to action. Now I don't know about you, but I didn't really pay much attention to that. I didn't put a call to action on the end of my slides. I mean, I might give them a link to a website, but I didn't ask them to do anything as a result of the workshop. And then I got to thinking about it, and I noticed that whenever I've gone to big conferences, a lot of times the presenter presents their stuff and you walk out with their handout, but they've given you no call to action either. So you walk out without something to do. And Nancy Duarte's work, she's absolutely fabulous at this, she says that should never happen. There always should be a call to action in your slide deck so that people know what they need to do next, what you're inviting them to do next. And so tell people what we want. You know, you might invite them to join your community, subscribe to your newsletter. You might ask them to sign up for a cause or sign a petition or whatever it is for your topic. But we should always have a call to action in our slide deck. And I've started doing it, and I'm really getting some pretty good results with that. And a lot of times what I ask them to do is subscribe. And I began to build my list more with people who really are interested in the stuff that I actually get to produce. So it doesn't happen often enough, and we really need to pay attention to it, I think. Okay, this is the last one, number 7. And we'll see if I get the pushback on this one that I get when I do this workshop. The last one, no more slides as handouts. And I'm sorry Susan had to leave because I know this is a real thing for her. When PowerPoint first hit my desk back in 1990, and in our office when we discovered we could print slides 3 to a page and we were done, that was efficient. We didn't have to do a whole lot of work to create a handout. We just got to push that out there and we were done. We were absolutely done with it. And it was exciting, you know, it was a relief. We didn't have to work so hard on it. It's been our norm now for about 25 years. Can you believe that? PowerPoint's been around for 25 years. And this is how we've been doing. It's normative. We've been doing our handouts. Now, there's a couple of problems with that. It may be efficient, but it's not very effective. And why is that? Well, the biggest reason why it isn't effective is that slides make really lousy documents, and handouts make really lousy slides. The combination misses the mark of the purpose for both of those. So we try to compromise in the middle. We have slides, we have handout, we compromise down the middle, and we miss the mark entirely. How many times have you gotten home from a conference, pulled up a handout, and thought, I'm going to use this, and you get to looking at it and you can't read it, or you can't read the tiny print, or you can't see the URL that they've given you on the bottom, so you can't go to the site to actually access the information. They just don't work very well. So here's what I'm going to suggest to you. Instead of doing that, work on creating really stellar slides. Make them visually communicate and impactful, colorful. Your brain loves color, it loves movement, it loves motion, it loves texture. So the more of that you can do in your slides, the better. Keep your words 6 or 7 a slide, so you're making it social media friendly and it actually connects for people. And then do your handout totally separate. Create something else that has your key points on it and has your key resources on it so that people don't have to go and dig for that. Okay? So that's the mission of doing that. Now there's a couple ways you can do that that makes it really easy when you're building your slides. If you will put your key points in your notes, there's 2 things happen because of that. First, your notes are there. So when you put your PowerPoint up, if you use the right mode, put them up on LCD, you can actually see your slides on the LCD, but you can see your notes on the screen in front of you. And that helps you in terms of being a presenter to guide people through, and you have a little bit of a crutch of something to lean on without leaning on the slides to do that, which is not a good thing. Don't do that. The other thing is that when you do that, you wind up being able to then put that content that you put in those notes, copy, paste it, drop it into your handout, and then you can edit from there. You can decide then what's most important. You can drop in maybe an image or a graphic of some sort. You can number, you can do any number of things with that. But once you've got it, and it's easier to do. And so I would say that you can make it pretty efficient still and pretty effective at the same time. So let's put that in. Now I have a thing about handouts, so I'm going to give you my 5 best tips for really good handouts. And I've been told mine are pretty good, and so I'll share with you the 5 things that I really believe in and that I practice, and we'll see if it works for you too. Okay? The first thing is get that handout down to a size that is concise and efficient. You want it to be efficient. Really get to the heart of your material. What are the things you want people to take away from that workshop? You don't have to include everything. Just include those takeaways that you want people to walk home with. So be sure you put that in there. If your slide handout is more than 3 pages, number the pages. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten home with a 10 or 12 page handout and the pages aren't numbered. And if they ever come apart from each other or get mixed up in your conference bag or you drop it in the floor, then getting it all back together is just horrendous. A lot of people don't bother to do that, and I'm going to tell you that it's a real, it's something that I really have passion for. It's got to be done to put that on there. The other thing people don't do is they don't put their contact information on there. So by all means, put your contact information on your handout, because that may be the very key that helps you connect to that person or connect that person to someone else that can help them. So it's a way that we can network better if we add our contact information. The fourth thing, we've already talked about it a little bit, is a Creative Commons license. We want to get that Creative Commons license up there. And that helps people know, of course, how we want them to use our material. And so they know that if they've got this handout and it really works for them and they want to put some of it in their newsletter, they know right up front whether they have permission to do that or not. They don't have to make an extra call and wait on a response and then actually get to do the work. They know right up front how that works and they can do it, right? Okay, so the last thing is, I have started doing this on the bottom footer. If I use Word, I put it in the bottom footer, and I will put in the conference title, the date, and under that I will put my workshop title. I have been at conferences where I sometimes will present 2 or 3 workshops, and it gets a little confusing, and so I've started doing that. I do it for myself as much as I do it for participants. I want participants to know where the workshop, which workshop it came from and what it was about, and I also want them to be able to contact me. So those are my best 5. I hope they work for you. If you have some, pop them over in the chat, and we'll scan through that chat here in just a second. While I'm waiting on those to pop up, I actually seen a few pop up. Ray was saying that she will never forget the first time she didn't have a handout for a conference. And I've done that too. I actually thought, I'm not going to kill trees this time. I'm not going to do a handout. I'm going to give them a link and they can go get it, right? That was my plan. Not a good plan. People tend to want something. And even if it's a 1-page front and back tips, the top 10 things, or these 5 things will get you further. I mean, anything that you have that you can give people, they appreciate, and they like to have something to take notes on, so they keep their notes with your workshop. So if you can give them something like that, that they actually have some white space, some room to take some notes, it's a really great thing to do, and it helps people. So I love that. The footer idea, that had never occurred to me. Absolutely. The footer is a great place to put a lot of it. You have to make it tiny usually. I usually make it about 10-point type, sometimes 9, but usually about 10-point type, and put that in there. But I put my contact information on the back page, the very last thing, and I sometimes will put a picture up. And I can't tell you how much that helps me when other presenters do that. They'll put their picture and a little bio and their contact information. And you know what? 6 months later, when I'm home after a conference I've been to, or a meeting or an event, for the life of me, I won't be able to put a name and a face together. And if people can do that for me on that handout, I can connect almost immediately back to that workshop and recall a lot more of that when I have that on my handout. So I would suggest, you know, if you are willing, put a small picture on there so that people can actually remember the presenter and what they said and make that connection. So that'll be another little tip. Okay. Yeah, only include the essentials. We don't need it all. That's another big thing. It's Chip and Dan Heath talk about that in, It's Made to Stick, about the curse of knowledge. We get really down in our field and we know a lot, and it becomes a curse rather than a blessing because we think we have to tell everybody everything we know. I'm betting that everybody on this list has had that experience at a conference before where a presenter has started like with day 1. It's like telling your life story by starting with the day you were born. You know, nobody wants to go back 50-some years and hear that story, right? They just want the good parts. And so I think that's true with these as well. Just give them the really key information and the highlights. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to actually pop over and I'm going to give you another offer. Okay, on the right-hand side of your page, you should have an offer for a new book. I've titled it Break the Rules, Create Wicked Great Slide Decks for Your Workshops, Trainings, and Presentations. I wanted it to be a how-to guide for creating the visuals, the interactive, and the social parts of the presentation slide decks. So I actually put it together in that way, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about it. It's about 120 pages or so, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about it. Inside this, I've included a framework and 3 methods for identifying and outlining your content. Without ever opening your software, offline, work with developing the content, telling the story that you're going to tell, or the content that you're going to tell in your workshop. The framework is a guide, and then these 3 processes are methods for doing that. And one of them in particular is my favorite. I learned it from a Native American teacher, and I've used it for a very long time. She's a gift in my world, and I've learned to apply it in a variety of ways. The methods make it easier to slip into that next stage after content using visuals and then interactivity, to think like that, and so I like the framework for that reason. There's a section in the book about creating your own unique template, unique to you. It could be unique to your organization using specific color schemes and the dynamic of that. It could be specific to your business if you have a business yourself. There's help in it for using photo backgrounds instead of color. I happen to be a fan of photo backgrounds. I very seldom will use a color background unless I just use a stark white canvas for the background. It has information about choosing your own unique font sets and font sizes. It has guidance for selecting color, including this really cool eyedropper tool that you can customize colors. So for example, if you've got a logo and you don't know the exact colors numbers of that logo, the eyedropper will help you by being able to click on it. It will give you the exact numbers, and then you can go plug those into PowerPoint, and your presentation will be perfectly matched. So it's really a nice tool. There are tools in here for compressing images, one of which I learned from Susan, and she let me add it in. And then I have some that I use myself. There are tools for screen capture. How often have you needed to capture a screen because you couldn't have a live internet connection to show a website or to show the steps through a process like signing up or registering, or the steps to doing your report or whatever that might be? There's a screen capture tools are really handy. There's a section on video. Every time I do this workshop, I have somebody ask me, how do I do video? I want to include video. And I would say, yay for you if you want to do video. That's awesome, because your brain loves moving things. And so if you put a video in, that's great. There are 3 ways to do it. One is not very elegant, but it works. The other 2 have a very tiny distinction that's really important. So I give you all 3 of those, and I give you the steps on how to do it and how to know when to do which one, because it can get a little confusing. There's a section on Creative Commons we've already talked about. There's a chapter on interaction, and that includes some tips I got from folks on Facebook who actually responded to an inquiry that I did about what you've seen other presenters do that really rocked and worked, and music is one. I don't know if anyone here actually uses music or not, but if you do, good for you, because it actually helps to manage the energy in the room. You can use intense music and you can use soft music depending on what it is that you're having your participants do. There's an entire chapter on that. There's some suggested ways for interactivity. You know, it's different if you have 10 people versus 1,500. So you have to think about that interaction and how you harvest that from the group. And so I've included a little bit about harvesting. There's a chapter on social media, and it's kind of a baseline chapter to get you started, and it gives you a few ideas for pulling out of that and how to use your slides as social micro content. So I've got a little piece about that in there. And then I've offered practice pages so you can do a practice activity, and there's a summary of the key points at the end of every chapter. So we have all of that in there. There's links. I've got about a dozen to different video, audio, and photo sites. About half of them are free, and they're good quality. Most of them I have tried myself and can recommend. And lastly, I even did a little audio visualization. It's something I learned to do when I was getting ready for a conference. I would go into a visualization. What is the room going to look like? How's it going to be set up? What do I want to have happen? And you do this little visualization, and it helps you to think about what you want to put in place to get your outcome. So you think about how it's set up, how it feels, what kind of tone do you have in the room, all of that. And you can either download it or you can listen to it online. I put it up both ways for you so you'd have that. So that's my pitch, my offer. The guide is, right now it's at an introductory rate. It's 19. So if you want to kick your slides up a notch, and you really want to engage people, and you want to visually communicate, and you want to put these practices into place, this is the book for you. You don't have to go out and read all of the books that are out there on this topic. This will get you a good start. Now, I would also say if you're interested in really perfecting it, there are great authors on this, and I've listed them in the book, so you can actually have other places to go for the information. So enough from me. that concludes the 7 steps and my offer to you, if you're interested in taking me up on that. If you want to email me, and I would be most happy to hear from you. So thank you for coming today. I am most grateful, and I look forward to seeing you on social media, and I hope you have a great weekend. Thanks, everybody.